Welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk 1210. We are full-on extraterrestrial radio. Please go to powertalk1210.com, download the free app. Everybody pretty much has a smartphone these days. It's the wave of the future. Download the free Power Talk app and stream all of our live local shows, including Solomon on Blast and the Jake Feinberg Show, and we really appreciate you joining us today. It's going to be a really special, special show. Down by the docks of the city live the street people, cats that are looking to wash away the dust of their everyday life by embracing the sounds of the city, the soundscapes of the Gulf of Mexico, and wharf rats on the pier. My guest is a musical star, not a glamour profession, but someone who has lived the blues, hitchhiking and playing for hot dogs and pizza. His engaging spirit and search for melodic improvisation has catapulted him directly into the swampadelic rock scene of New Orleans. Both his feet remain firmly planted on the ground, while the music he plays comes through him via the heavens. This is evident when you hear him play with cats like Bill Kreutzmann. Billy was lost musically before he encountered my guest, playing at a music festival, and introduced himself. The two began walking in odd meters, 7/4, 13/7, waves of notes, subdividing constantly, effortlessly keeping time and playing the song. My guest got his name from the Rastas, a valiant group of reggae cats who play the beat on the 1/3 instead of the 2/4. This doesn't faze my guest, whose alacrity and dexterity on his axe allows him to fit into any musical setting, as was just evidenced at Jazz Fest in New Orleans. Malcolm Papa Molly Wellborn, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, how you doing, Jake?
How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Oh, you're most welcome, man. It's so great to connect with you, brother. You know, Papa, my show is about the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage. And when I talk about life, I talk about overcoming adversity, because I think it's important in this modern era time to talk about overcoming adversity and gaining strength from that. And I was hoping you could talk about a time in your career when you were really fighting it, and how you overcame it and how it made you stronger.
Well, you know, I have to say this. Anybody that knows me knows that I've been down a lot of roads, and some of those roads have, even though they've all led me to where I am now, some of them might have been just getting me off the path just for a little while. I think that a lot of people in my profession, they are inspired by something when they're very young, that oftentimes the genius of others, and they try to aspire to that. Occasionally, you find along the path that maybe the only way to sustain this intangible feeling is by performing the music with all your heart and soul. Then, no matter how many paths you go down, how many roads you take, you know, you're all by yourself at the end of the day. You've just walked off stage in front of, you know, maybe 3 or 4 people who were just happened to be there and really dug it, or maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people who are all screaming and yelling.
Right.
But then at the end of the day, you're just by yourself again, and you got to face some realizations, you know. And one of those things for me was that I hadn't really been taking very good care of my temple. You know, I had been trying to take good care of my muse and my music. But it had led me to neglecting a lot of areas of my own personal physical well-being, and I think, like, you know, it came to a point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. It really it was either, you know, if I wanted to stick around, which I do, I needed to address it, and I'm much better off now for it.
Yeah, you know, I was going to say, without ever meeting you, but, you know, I look at some YouTube clips, and Papa, I mean, you look compared 4 years ago, I mean, you look amazing right now as far as like the weight loss. You've really, and I was thinking last night, I said, the cat is playing with some of the heaviest free music people in the world. It's all come together completely organically. His career has evolved in a very natural way, but yet I'm like, I think he's going to die if he doesn't take care of himself. Maybe the doctor told you that, or maybe I don't. I guess I'm curious about the discipline, because I look at you now and you look like, I mean, you are Papa and you still have the fire, but you don't look the same.
The weight loss is of course a big part of it, but it's really I think the weight gain was more of a byproduct of the things I was talking about before, about just being really on point musically, but lost spiritually, perhaps.
Wow. Did you? Can I ask you about how you got centered spiritually?
Yeah, absolutely. I had. You start making enough bad choices, and pretty soon you don't have many choices left. so that's it's like, you wake. I mean, I basically woke up in a hospital and had been in a coma for several days, and my wife of 30 plus years was there by my bedside, and I saw that the doctors looked extremely relieved that I had gained consciousness, and I realized that the universe was giving me one more chance, and I'd better listen. So
wow.
I've been towing the line ever since.
Wow, good for. I mean, it's just such a beautiful. Wow. I mean, you got one more chance, man, and I'm so happy. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think I probably had several chances before that, But
no, I know. I mean, I feel at 38. I mean, I'm not. I don't live the musician's lifestyle, but I definitely feel that I'm being given new chances, and I really need to. I just, to me, there's a finality thing there, but ultimately following through on it is key. I mean, you are in that process of following through on it. You're still channeling your muse. You're still, you're playing vigorously. But the wake up call. I mean, you have kids too, right? I mean, you want to be around. You want to stick.
Yeah,
around,
absolutely. Yeah, I became a dad when I was only 19 years old, and that's how I got the nickname Papa Molly. I didn't just make that up. I was in the early 80s, I was playing in a reggae band, and we were getting lots of shows where we were opening for the top Jamaican stars of the day, and actually getting to tour with some of my reggae heroes, And one of those guys was Winston Rodney, aka Burning Spear.
Right on.
And we were on tour with the Burning Spear band, and those guys were already calling me Molly because, my name is Malcolm, and just the way they pronounced, that was just their nickname for me. It was just, hey Molly, I'm a, and then
I love it.
So then we had the day off in Austin, which is where I was living at the time, and they needed to go out and run some errands, like do some laundry and go buy some groceries, healthy, some Ital food and that sort of thing, right? So I volunteered to basically show them around, and we had to stop by my house. And even at that time, even in the early '80s, I already had 4 children. Have 6 grown kids now.
Holy cow! 6 kids. You have 6. You have been producing prolifically, man. That's awesome.
Well, like I say, this is a name that I've kind of grown into. At the time that
I don't want to stop you were going to show these cats something in your house. I don't want to cut the story. If you want to keep channeling, yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to. Basically, I had to stop by my house and just check in with my wife and kids, and I had a van full of these Rasta guys from Burning Spear Band, and they were, when I came back into the van, they were saying, hey Molly, who's picking them? Who's children them? And I said, oh, they're mine, What? Ah,
I love
So from that point on, they started calling me Papa Molly, And it was a very good natured joke almost, kind of like say it was their way of like kidding me for being so young to have so many children. Okay, that was and I mean when I was in my early 20s, I looked like I was in my late teens anyway. I was always had kind of young from my age back then anyway. But long story short, we did a radio interview in New Orleans while we were on the tour. Early in the tour, we did a radio interview in New Orleans on WWOZ, still one of my favorite stations in the world. And the interviewer kept hearing them refer to me as Papa Molly. And finally, she addressed it, and then they all started talking about it. Okay, well, this other guy wants to interview us a couple of days later. He writes a story, and he had heard the Papa Molly reference on the radio interview, and he asked about it, and they started talking about it again. It was really the Burning Spear Band that was being interviewed, not me. One reason I was there is because I was driving them around. I'd become friends with them, and
right.
I was their United States liaison, basically.
Sure.
And also my band was opening for them too. So, but I was becoming friends with them, and so they started again talking about Papa Molly, and Burning Spear himself even said at one point, they asked they said, well, we know that you've influenced lots of people. Who are some of your influences? And at some point he said, well, Papa Molly is one of my influences.
Wow.
And I mean, again,
Whoa.
this is these guys are just, this is them just joking with me, kidding, they're ribbing me because I'm in the room with them, and it's just their way of like, good mood, what I mean? Good nature.
I've interviewed not enough of the reggae cats, but enough to know exactly what you're talking about. They're just so tongue-in-cheek about it, yeah.
Yeah. So it was that was really how it started, right? But anyway, it made it into these two interviews. Now, by the time the tour reached Los Angeles, it was like an Associated Press had somehow picked up one of these interviews, and then the quotes were taken from that story, from the Associated Press story, and the guy in the LA Times, who is still a friend of mine to this day, Tom Chaney, did a front page of the entertainment section story on the tour, and he mentioned my name as Papa Molly in that story, and from that point on, it's just like every time we would get any press, anytime my band would get any press, that's how it would refer to me. So it was this thing that started as a joke and took on a life of its own. After the reggae band, after we kind of ran our course, I'd already made a conscious choice to go back to the music of my own roots. If anything, if playing with Jamaican musicians taught me anything, it taught me that, that to respect my own roots and culture, I got to be really well accepted in the reggae world, but I realized it wasn't really my culture.
Can you unpack that what you just said a little bit? How did that reinforce your own culture by playing with it?
Well, because it gave me a sense. First of all, their sense of identity and their sense of their culture. It's a very cultural music, both in terms of that it's originated in Africa and came to the Caribbean and took root at something unique, reggae, through ska and reggae music and rock steady and all that. And yet, their influences were very much from New Orleans, in Memphis, places like that. That they, over and over and over again, the guys in all the reggae bands I played with said that they loved New Orleans music. So it made me very conscious of the fact that, I should really be true to my own culture and my own roots, and which is what eventually, that led me back to playing the music that I grew up with, which is Louisiana music.
No, go ahead.
I never really looked back after that. It gave me, seeing them display their own sense of cultural identity and purpose gave me a sense more of who I was and where I was coming from.
Papa, I wanted to ask you, I've been talking to lately some of the jazzers interviewed Miroslav Vitous, who was part of Weather Report, and I did my third interview with Johnny McLaughlin. These guys are so grounded. Well, Johnny is definitely a grounded cat. But, you know, I wanted you to talk about, Miroslav was talking to me about playing music, the music coming through you and really coming from the heavens. And I want you, the best you can, I know it's hard in words, but if you could talk to younger cats, we are living through such a formulaic time in music. I mean, it's amazing for me to think, even though in New Orleans, it's one of the last regional bastions of music left in the country, if not the only one, Chicago maybe. But, you know, there's a lot of gentrification going on in the urban centers. But for younger cats, everything is so formulaic now. There's a lot of digitization in music. But I want you to talk about playing music when the music is coming through you and you transcend. And I want you to try to articulate that for the audience, how that feeling and ultimately how that co-joins magic and music.
I totally understand what you're talking about. And by the way, I did see Miroslav Vitous when I was quite young.
Really? You saw him with Weather Report? Yeah.
No, not with Weather Report, although the reason I went to the concert was because I was already a Weather Report fan.
Right.
But this was after he had left Weather Report, and he was playing with Larry Cordial and Alphonse Mouzon. And I went and saw a concert at a very, very small college in Conway, Arkansas, and it was a pretty remarkable show.
He was playing electric bass?
Yep. Playing electric bass.
Yeah, it was yeah, go ahead.
It was fantastic. But getting back to what you're talking about, okay. When other people ask me for my advice about music in general, how to become a realized musician, and it is very hard for young people these days. You would think that because of all the resources at their availability, that it would be easier, but in a lot of ways, having so many choices makes it even more difficult to find the essence of who they are as a young musician. Those that are able to find it at a young age, I have a lot of respect for, because it took me a long time. I was already in my early 30s before I really found my own musical identity. But the way that I did it had nothing to do with the fact that I had been practicing my instrument. I mean, it had something to do with that, but it had a lot to do with the fact that I had absorbed a lot of influences and been curious enough to really follow those sources, those musical inspirations, to follow the path, what led them to do it. I think that was a big part of it. And yet, this is what I try to tell people when they ask me my musical advice. You spend the first part of your musical life learning how to use music just like you would use dialogue, like you would use learning a language. You need to learn it well so that you can be eloquent and so that you can also be interesting. You know, you can learn a lot of big words and be the most boring cat at the party if you're just,
Yeah, I dig. Yeah.
But so that's what you do. Approach music like that, because music is all about conversations, and it's about drawing people in to your story that you're telling. It's not about showing off how many big words you have in your vocabulary. Mm-hmm. And so you spend the first part of your musical life doing that, and then once you do that, then you are a suitable vehicle for these ancient spirits that have existed long before we were here and will be here a long time after we're here. There's something that's it's a force that it's in nature. It's in every vibration in the universe. Sound is vibration. So you become a conduit for that. You become a vehicle for it. You have to be good enough on your instrument to be able to be a vehicle for it. It won't. The muse won't visit you if you're not ready for it. But once you realize that, then you can open yourself up to the fact that every time you do this in front of people, it's like praying. It's sharing something, this universal consciousness, and allowing those vibrations and spirits to pass through you for a time, and hopefully to inspire others while you're doing it.
I mean, it's so well put. I think also Miroslav was referring to the fact that when he was in Weather Report, a guy like Joe Zawinul, and I don't want to bash Zawinul because the guy's a titan, but he said that Wayne Shorter could play from the heavens, like you said, be a conduit to these ancient spirits. Mouzon was like that until he did something very, I'll tell you off air about what he did to get fired from the band. And then Miroslav could as well. But they said Joe was so, what it boils down to is, Papa, is that Joe's ego was getting in the way. And he couldn't handle the playing from the heavens, and he would sort of just go down his keyboard and just start playing one of his tunes, and that was a way of sort of getting off of the insecure track. So I mean, can you talk about how you have to sort of control I don't know what the right word is, but it's about monitoring, or because if your ego gets in the way, like you said, you have to know your instrument, but at the same time you also have to listen. I mean, you're talking about having a conversation on stage. And if if you can't do that and your ego gets in the way, that's an issue. So, I mean, how has your ego evolved in your playing career?
I mean, honestly, when I play music, I may be caught up in my ego before I walk out there on stage. I don't worry so much about like stage fright sort of nervousness anymore. The things that concern me more are about like, if I'm going to, if the venue has promoted the show properly, that sort of thing. Those sort of things.
That's not your job, right? I mean, you're worried about things,
right.
But yeah.
Exactly, they're out of my control, basically. Yeah. But then once I'm on stage, I mean, I really, really forget. I forget who I am. I forget where I am. I forget who else is listening. I mean, at least when I'm at my very best, it's like that. I'm aware of the other musicians on stage because it's like we're having this telepathic conversation or something, but honestly, I do forget oftentimes like what's going on and where I am and what I'm doing and who I am even. When music is at its best, I think that everyone is so in the moment that's kind of the way it is. And like I was saying before about being a vessel or being, you can't receive something if the vessel is already full of your own ego or your own, thoughts or whatever. It's like your thoughts get in the way of creating great musical ideas sometimes. If you're thinking about, let's see, that sound really cool if I play this next chord, well, then you're gonna miss it.
Right. Well, I mean, that's exactly. I mean, that McLaughlin said that. He goes up. The whole goal of my life is to stop thinking, because if I'm thinking, then I'm not playing. I'm really not playing.
That's exactly right.
Could you personalize or give it? I'd love you to talk about. I'm so fascinated with the mysticism. I mean, there's only two letters that separate music and magic, and the idea that you talk about these ancient spirits that have been here well before we were conceived and are going to be here long after. Could you talk about a time when you felt like your vessel had enough room to receive some kind of spiritual awakening on the bandstand?
I got glimpses of it when I was very young, but they were just glimpses, and I think a lot of it probably had to do with, if I may talk frankly, with psychedelics.
Sure.
And they really opened me up to that sort of thought, and I'm not saying that that's the way that people should achieve their musical goals, because really and truly it takes a lot of discipline to get where you want to go musically. But as far as my own personal experiences, I did get glimpses of it when I was younger, and was high on psychedelics or even high on pot. That something was kind of, like there was something greater to the picture than just me learning these chords and these notes or whatever. It felt like it meant something. However, as I got older, I realized that it just had to do with me being open, being good enough to like actually to physically pull off the things that I wanted to do musically, but to get to be comfortable enough with that to like get out of the way of it and let it just happen. I don't know how to describe it other than that. I really do feel that there is a stronger presence that, when you see people dancing and you say, and you can tell it's just such a natural thing for them. It's like they're not thinking about, I'm going to put my left foot in front of my right. No, it's something that's been around for a long, long time. It's very, you have to learn certain things in order to be able to do it. But then to do it well, you have to really get out of the way of yourself and just let it happen.
Okay. So my two questions. Can you talk about a couple things you said you have to learn a couple of things. Could you talk about a couple of things you have to learn, but then also, if you never if you never tripped out, do you think you'd have that perspective as you got older?
I think that I probably would have achieved it through a few other life experiences if I hadn't gotten there first by dropping acid
right.
or taking mushrooms. As I got older, I went through experiences like that felt a lot the same way, like being present at the birth of my children, for instance. That was, and meditation, yoga, things like that. So there's lots of ways to get there. That's just one way.
Exactly, and I mean, this just popped into my head though. Did you ever get a chance to cross paths with Bobby Charles?
I didn't know him personally. I have a lot of friends that did know him. I really wish that I had, I wish I had known him. I honestly, I was familiar with his music from the time I was very young because my older sister bought that record, "See You Later, Alligator," when I was still just a baby. And of course, the fact that it was talking about an alligator, and I was, probably 3 or 4 years old, I thought it was the greatest record ever.
You're so synced into that, yeah. Oh, I mean, the reason I ask you is I want you to talk. You make a living as a professional musician and an accomplished one. Bobby, to me, granted, I never met him or even saw him live, but I have this album, a self-titled album, and he's talking about street people. It's such a great tune. He's talking about these. I mean, I cry like when I'm dancing with my kids to this. To me, it's what music, to me, that's the seminal point of music, is that you're interacting with people. You're not even there. You're not even playing to please the people. It's just you're channeling this incredible spiritual energy to the regular cats. And you're in New Orleans. You just finished the festival there. Is there still that? Do you find times to still be able to have that authentic connection with? I'm talking like blind dobro cats. Maybe not necessarily in that incarnation, but just regular cats, just regular peeps. I mean, do you still feel a connection like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I live in, an historic neighborhood in New Orleans, and I walk and ride my bike every day, and I spend a lot of time talking to people on the street and talking to other musicians on the street, and that's something that's never far from me at all. Never has been. By the way, that Bobby Charles song, in fact, that entire album is one of my absolute favorite records. Ever. Yeah.
Unbelievable. I think people. Yeah, go ahead.
Some people want to work for a living. We need people like that.
No, and I think I'm in a good place now. I mean, these
Oh
are
God, that song. That song gives me goosebumps every time I hear it.
ever. I mean, I really want I want you and Porter and Kreutzmann to play that. I mean, that tune to me is like so. Yeah, I mean that's a tearjerker. But the thing is that he's got a dog. He's on the cover. He's kissing a dog. He's eating watermelon. You know, he's just having a ball. I guess here's the so you obviously you answer the question. You're out and you're interacting. And New Orleans is a family unto itself. But for so many cats now, I remember talking to Ron Carter and trying to figure out. Those 2 to 6 jam sessions and where the black newspapers to cover the black art form of jazz and all this stuff. And, he's just like, he's like, people have their home entertainment systems and we've gotten, Mothers Against Drunk Driving and people are inside more and they're caught up in their digital stuff and it's more comfortable. And so they're out less. But what would you say to people? Why is it important to go and interact with other musicians on the street, people that might be suffering, people that might be high, people that might be just regular peeps? What is it? Why is that a productive thing for an artist or just a person in general?
Well, it keeps you in touch with who you are and where you came from. For one thing, for somebody like me, it is it's just a constant. It's a constant reminder because I did hitchhike around. I did live on the streets. I did busk for my money. I did that stuff. It might have been a long time ago, but it's still a part of me. It's still a part of who I am and why I am the way I am. And in New Orleans, the best music comes from the street anyway. I mean,
right.
it does. I mean, it's like, it's like you're going to walk. I mean, right here in my house, on any given day of the week, I'll hear a bass drum and I'll hear a sousaphone, and I'll say, "Oh, there's a parade." And, my wife and I'll get on our bikes and we'll go just follow the sound until we find and there'll be a second line. It happens all the time. The street music in New Orleans, that's where it's at.
Talking to Papa Molly here on the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk 1210. The only question that I wrote out today was this. It says, Papa, what do you like about drummers who play the song and are keeping time, but not even thinking about keeping time? They're really playing the song. What do you like about drummers like that?
What, everything? Is it a trick question?
No, I mean, it's like because there are not that many that are gifted enough to play the song. They can keep time, they can swing the band, but they can't play the song. Tony Williams can play the song, Bill Kreutzmann can play but I just want you to talk about the drummers that play the song and how do you work with that, because it's to me it's an unorthodox way of doing it, because in order to do it well you got to be really freaking good.
Well, I will say this, okay? I've been very, very blessed that I've played with some of the greatest drummers in the world. Even at a time when I don't think I was completely realized yet, I managed to somehow play with some of the greatest drummers, and they, of course, helped me get to where I am today musically. One of the first great drummers that I really worked with was a guy who's known simply as Frosty, and he was the drummer that played on Lee Michaels' records back in the late 60s.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
And he also played with a lot of other people that it's not quite. He made his name with Lee Michaels, but then after that association, he went on to play with. He played with Sly Stone. He was on. There's a Riot Going On. He's on that album. He's played with Funkadelic on Let's Take It to the Stage. Anyway, he moved to Austin, Texas, where I was living at the time, and he and I formed a friendship, and he plays on my first album, and we played together for close to 10 years. He was just an amazing drummer. If you've never checked out his stuff, just Google Frosty the drummer. His name is Barry.
Frosty the drummer. Was the stuff with Lee Michaels, was it just the organ drums duo thing?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
I love that stuff. Okay, go ahead, yeah.
And so anyway, that was like the first really, really great drummer that I got to work with. But I mean, since then I've gotten to work with so many great drummers. I mean, currently I'm in a side project band with Stanton Moore, who's one of the celebrity funk drummers out of New Orleans, and I've worked with so many great drummers. My own drummer, the guy that plays with me on a lot of, he's been with me about 13 years. Rob Kidd is fantastic drummer. And now Bill Kreutzmann, I will say this about Bill: he, more than any other musician I've ever known, he liberated me in a way that nobody else was able to until I met him. He turned me on to some very, very interesting concepts about his music and his approach to music that it freed me in a way that I can't even describe it. It's just beyond words, really, other than that there's the way I played before I met Bill, and now there's the way I play now.
What did he? What were his philosophies on music that he? I mean, were these verbal things, or was it just stuff you picked up on the bandstand?
Eventually, as we got to be better and better friends, he shared his philosophy about it. On the bandstand, it was noticeable immediately that that certain rules didn't apply, and I think that
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that anybody that's deep into the Dead can kind of figure that out on their own. But when you're on the bandstand with a guy like Bill, who's played thousands and thousands of shows, where the whole purpose is to achieve this sort of musical nirvana and freedom. One thing that he said to me one time that really was very mind-blowing concept. He said, like, if you're in the middle of a lengthy psychedelic freestyle jam and you lose your way, you don't know where you are, just remember that any note can be the one. and so there's so much emphasis on R&B and funk music and rock and roll and everything that to like know exactly where the one is.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
So that you can count time properly. But in Bill's world, things can get so free and out there sometimes that any note can be the one, and that if you count from that point on, it'll eventually come back around to where it's supposed to be. In the meantime, you don't fight it; you just flow with it. He explained it better than I'm doing. But nevertheless, however he explained it to me, it made sense to me at the time, and it still makes sense to me.
How did someone like George Porter handle? I still can't quite understand. I mean, I listen obsessively to the early '80s Grateful Dead, which is not everybody's favorite period of the Grateful Dead, but I still am trying to figure out how they didn't. They knew where the time was, but they weren't even thinking about the time. I don't know how he locked the groove with Phil so well, even though they were both playing so free. How did that all come together when you guys started to play together? I watched this interview with you and him, and it was just, I was like so happy. It was just such a beautiful thing where it's like, you're just playing a festival and the guy walks up to you, Billy walks up to you with a cowboy hat, and you didn't even know at first it was him. But once
I didn't. I didn't recognize him for the first 30 minutes that we talked. I had no idea that it was Bill Kreutzmann, and I think that's the beauty part of it. Really, is that
right.
He's so used to having people just so in awe that they can't really be themselves, and because it was backstage at one of my shows, and because he was coming to me just as a music lover and as a very friendly, open cat, I mean, that's how we became friends on that level before there was ever any mention of like, I'm the iconic drummer from the Grateful Dead. He never would say that anyway. He's a very humble, sweet cat,
Oh, I mean, I'm not even. I mean, I never even saw the Dead. I mean, I just get off on this really period of time when most people it was kind of what you were talking about before, where Garcia was in his muse, but he wasn't taking care of himself physically at all. I often wonder, I'm curious about your opinion about how much influence, would there have been a Grateful Dead without Bill Kreutzmann?
Oh my God, listen, I don't think there'd been a Grateful Dead without any of them. They're all very important to the formula of what made that band special, and the fact that but Kreutzmann's feel is unlike anybody else's. I've heard so many drummers and played with so many great drummers, and Bill has something that's completely unique, and it's a strange mixture of, and it's not strange, it's a beautiful mixture, really, of like early rock and roll. He told me that, you know, when he was just learning to play drums, that he listened to Fats Domino records over and over and over and over, and it makes perfect sense when you think about it.
Wow.
Because he's got and his mother is from New Orleans too, which a lot of people don't know. Bill Kreutzmann. So, you know, that was one of the first things that we found out about each other before I even knew his name. Was that his mom was from New Orleans, and mine is too.
And then eventually, after you shared all this deep personal information, you're like, "Are you Bill Kreutzmann?"
yeah, that's true. And the thing that made me finally realize that I was talking to Bill. Well, he introduced himself as Bill. He didn't say it, Bill Kreutzmann.
Sure.
But he had a little Grateful Dead pin on his hat, on his cowboy hat, or a Steely or some, you know, Steal Your Face emblem on his hat. But I just really wasn't focused on that, and I wasn't focused on the fact that he had introduced himself as Bill. I was just focused on the fact that here's this really friendly guy. He seems to have really enjoyed the set that I just played, and he likes New Orleans music, and he likes fishing, and I like fishing, and, you know, his mom's from New Orleans, and my mom's from New Orleans, and we're talking about all kinds of stuff. And then I noticed that there was just a bigger and bigger crowd of people that were gathering around us. You know?
That was for you, man. Yeah, right.
Yeah. After a while, it became quite obvious that it wasn't for me. You know, so, that's when I said, wait a minute, are you Bill Kreutzmann? He said, well, actually, it's pronounced Kreutzmann. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, oh my God, my head is swimming right now. You know, Papa, talk about, especially with Seven Walkers, or, you know, or any of the bands that you're, you know, collaborating with. You know, we're hung up today on everything's got to be, you know, short sound bites, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. You know, short. You know, perfect. Everything's got to be focused on perfection, redoing it over and over and over and over again. Can you talk about imperfection, your philosophy on imperfection, and especially playing with cats like George, you know, and Billy, where it's like, that's the sometimes the mistake is the gateway to 7 minutes of bliss.
Yeah. Well, again, getting back to George, I know that the question you started to ask was how did George fit into that?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yes,
thing.
Yes.
So, not to avoid that question, I want to say this right off the bat. George had absolutely zero problem playing with Bill. Now, I have played with some bass players that did not know how to play with Bill. Some very good bass players that did not know how to play with Bill because they were just used to a more rigid approach about time.
Sure.
George had no problem playing with Bill. They hit it off immediately, both on a personal level and on a musical level. Bill was very nervous about playing with George for the first time, and that was the funny part about it to me, was that the Grateful Dead were such Meters fans that I'm the one who brought George into the band, you know, because I knew George from New Orleans and gigs that George and I had done together in New Orleans. So when Reed Mathis was the original bass player for Seven Walkers, Reed already had obligations with. He had just moved to San Francisco to be a full-time member of this band, Tea Leaf Green. And at the time, we didn't know what Seven Walkers was going to do. We didn't know if Bill was going to really commit to it fully. So you know, Reed had to make a decision, really, basically, and he said, well, I'm not going to be able to go on tour with you. So I was actually with George when I got the news from Reed. I was with George rehearsing for another gig here in New Orleans. And I said, George, by any chance, are you available in April to do a couple of weeks with me and Bill Kreutzmann? And George said, let me check my calendar. And just like that, George was in the band. I mean, it took, you know, he didn't band immediately, but after the first tour, everybody realized that this was magic, and including George. And so, yeah, but it was so funny and kind of almost, I don't want to say cute, but it was kind of like, you know, it was kind of cute, really, that Bill was so nervous about playing with George Ford Jr.
No, I mean, I think that speaks to the but I mean, when you, so in those, because okay, so we've vetted the original Papa Billy meeting backstage, but when you can you, like, did you guys, when you got on stage together, I mean, what was the stuff that you kind of had to through that first tour? I mean, I can't, there was no, how did you work through certain things as a band? I mean, it's not like you guys were the Grateful Dead playing for 35 years, because you listen to some of the Dead stuff and you know, in the early 80s, they were working out new tunes, and the philosophy of the band was, we're not rehearsing this stuff. We'll just work it out on stage, you know?
Yeah.
You know, and how did you work stuff out on stage, and how did you communicate and make it so that nobody felt, like you said, they were all, you know, Bill was nervous, so you made everybody feel comfortable. How do you, what's the leadership qualities that allow to foster that free music?
I think basically it just comes from all of us having spent so many hours on stage that we're not really nervous being on stage. It's the communication between Bill and I was so great right from the start. I mean, we played on stage together the first day we met. I don't know if that's been documented that much, but
no. What, are you really? You did, wait, hold on. Say that again.
Yeah, we met at a festival.
Okay.
You know, I was headlining one of the stages, and Bill, I think, had headlined one of the other stages the night before with another project that he had at the time called BK3, which was him and O'Teal, who's in Dead and Company now.
Sure.
And, of course, the bass player from the Allman Brothers, O'Teal Burbridge. And they had headlines like either the night before or maybe the day, 2 days before or something like that. Anyway, so Bill and his wife, girlfriend at the time, but wife now, Amy, they had stayed over. I think one of the reasons they decided to stay was because his wife Amy had knew about my music because she's from New Orleans also.
Sure.
And she had turned Bill on to one of my CDs, and so they had decided they were going to stay over another day so that they could see me play. So this is all stuff I found out later. But the day that I met Bill, we hung out all day long, and we talked about music a lot. But then it got to a certain point, and Bill said, you know, we could probably play if we wanted to. And I said, really? You think you could make that happen? He goes, yeah, I think I could probably make that happen. And so his wife gets on the phone, and a few minutes later, I mean, there's like golf carts coming to pick us up, take us over to a stage, and there's already, you know, they've already gathered a few likely candidates to be like the rhythm section, and we just, well, Bill was the drummer, of course, but to be the
Sure,
bass,
sure.
they found a bass player and a keyboard player, and so we just said it was Oregon Country Fair, and we set up on the stage, you know, as soon as we started playing, people started saying, "Hey, what's going on? Hey, look, there's Papa Molly and Bill playing music," you know. So that was our first time to play together. So we had absolutely no rehearsal, nothing. No, you know, we just played.
This is unbelievable. So, and this is just so absolutely classic. So you're telling me you have the original meeting, and then you go through the day hanging out, and then you're playing that evening or that afternoon.
Yep.
And and the tunes, were you just playing, just jamming, or was there, you call out tunes that you knew?
We didn't call out anything. We never stopped. From the time we started playing, there was never a pause, other than to maybe just kind of like shift gears and go from one mood into the next mood. And yes, there were songs involved, and there was, but it was mostly just improvisational. Yeah.
Wow.
You know, I mean, I'll put it this way, that it was moving in a way that like I say, even for that very first time, it moved me in a way that I had never experienced before. And Steve Parrish, who was the roadie for the Grateful Dead from the time they first formed up until the very end, he was there, and he walked up to me afterwards, and handed me Jerry Garcia's guitar pick, which, unlike a lot of guitar players that use different picks every night, apparently Jerry used the same pick night after night after night after night. And one of Steve Parrish's jobs was to hand it to him as he was walking on stage and take it from him as he was walking off stage. And he had kept it ever since Jerry had died. And he walked up to me after that very first show with Bill. He walked up to me. He just looked stunned, and he took that out of his wallet and handed it to me. And Bill's the one who told me the story about it, about how this pick is actually the same pick that Jerry used for years and years and years and years. So anyway, that's obviously a very treasured moment and a treasured item.
Did you get it? Did Bill make it to Jazz Fest this year?
No, this is the first year he hasn't been down in about 5 years. We share the same birthday too. You're
on 5/7 too?
I'm on 5/6.
You're on.
I'm May 6th. And
man, this is
May
so
7th.
beyond class. Papa, listen, I just want to I want to finish part one here
Sure.
by asking you about your concept of love. My show is dedicated to love. I'm not a musician. I just know that the world that we live in is a lot of suffering. You know it. You see it. I see it. We see it in our own lives. What is your concept of love, and how do you bring love to the world?
Well, there's many different types of love. Obviously, there's a love between a man and a woman. There's a love between, a parent and child. And then there's the love that you try to show to it's like a gratitude, I guess. There's a love that's like a gratitude that you try to reflect in everything you do, and it's your way of saying, that you're grateful just to be here and to be hopefully not just taking up space, using up air, but give something back.
Sure.
And it's, so that's sort of, it's like love in the physical realm, besides what that sounds like just having, making love or having sex or whatever, but love in the physical realm of actually doing good deeds to try to improve, your world just a little bit.
And not expecting anything in return.
And not expecting anything in return, exactly.
Kind of like what Parrish did with the pick, it was a stunned look of love, saying, "My God, that was mind blowing, and this is it, and this is the way I'm signifying it." But we can mull on the. I want to go deeper on that. I didn't. All this stuff is just a free flow, and I look at you men, and I want to give a shout out to Billy Iusu who connected us, and a beautiful cat, and let's plan on doing part two sometime in the summer. It was just an honor to connect with you. You're really grounded cat, and it's just such it's an honor to connect with you, man.
Likewise, you have just from reading transcripts of your other interviews and just seeing all the people that you've interviewed, it's like a who's who of people that I hold in high regard in the musical realm and otherwise too. But thank you very much for asking good questions, and keep on doing what you're doing, man.
All right, brother. Much love to you, Papa. We'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers. We'll be right back on the Jake Feinberg Show.